You were always the one who held the umbrella while everyone else stayed dry. People looked at you when you were 7 or 10 or 12, and they used words like responsible old soul and reliable. They meant it as a compliment. They saw a child who did not throw tantrums, who cleaned their own room without being asked, and who understood the family financial stress or emotional turmoil better than the adults in the room did. But what they were actually witnessing was not maturity. It was a survival strategy. It was a premature hardening of a soul that was not yet meant to carry the weight of the world. Think back to those moments when you felt like the only functional person in the room. Maybe you were the one making sure your siblings were fed because your parents were working 3 jobs. Or maybe you were the emotional anchor for a mother who could not stop crying, or a father who could not control his anger. You learned to read the room before you learned to read complex books. This hypervigilance became your second skin. You traded your playfulness for a sense of duty, and your curiosity for a sense of caution. You did not just grow up. You were forced to skip the chapters of your life that were supposed to be about making mistakes, being messy, and being cared for. And now, as an adult, you might find yourself unable to relax. You feel a strange gnawing guilt whenever you sit down to do nothing. You feel like if you are not being productive or helpful or solving someone else's problem, you do not have a right to exist. You are an expert at taking care of everyone except the one person who needs it most. The child inside you, who is still waiting for someone to tell them, "It is okay, I have got this, you can go play now." You are not just efficient or born this way. You are a survivor of a childhood where you had to be your own parent. You are not broken. You are a masterpiece that was built under immense pressure. And it is time to understand why your brain chose this path. To understand why this happens, look at the first pattern, the high achiever. This child learns very early that love is not a right but a performance. The child notices that when the grades are perfect or when the chores are done without a single word of complaint, the tension in the house drops. The child begins to associate personal worth with utility. This person is not being good because this person wants to be. This person is being good because the environment feels too fragile for this person to be anything else. In the brain of this child, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning logic and long-term consequences, starts to work over time. While other children are playing in the mud, this child is planning the daily schedule or worrying about whether the grocery money will last until Friday. This is a massive burden for a developing brain. The constant pressure creates a flood of stress hormones, specifically cortisol, which stays at a high level in the child's system. Over time, these high levels of cortisol act like a chemical signal telling the brain that the world is a dangerous place. In response, the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes enlarged and hypersensitive. The child is now trapped in a state of permanent high alert. This is why, even years later as an adult, this person cannot stand the sound of a door slamming or a slight change in someone's tone of voice. The brain is still trying to protect the child from a threat that has long since passed. The second pattern is the emotional caretaker. This child is a tiny therapist in a small body. This child becomes the invisible anchor for the parents. If the mother is struggling with depression, the child becomes the light. If the father is overwhelmed by anger, the child becomes the silent peacemaker. The child develops a sixth sense for emotional shifts that most adults do not even notice. This is the root of what we call hyper-independence. The child learns that having needs is a burden. The child believes that if this person asks for help, the family system will collapse. So the child buries every need, every fear, and every tear deep inside. The inner monologue of the caretaker child is a constant whisper. The child tells the self that their feelings do not matter as much as the peace of the home. The child believes that if the child is quiet, helpful, or invisible, everyone will stay together. This belief becomes the blueprint for every future relationship. As an adult, this person finds it impossible to say no. This person feels responsible for the happiness of every person in the room. When a friend is sad, this person feels a physical weight in the chest. When a partner is distant, this person goes into a frantic state of fixing. The brain has been wired to believe that emotional safety must be earned through constant service. The root cause of this behavior is often a missing protector. When the adults who were supposed to provide safety are instead the ones needing to be saved, the child has no choice but to step into the gap. This is not a conscious decision. It is a biological survival mechanism. The brain of the child recognizes that survival depends on the stability of the caregivers. If the caregivers are falling apart, the child must become the glue that holds them together. This process of parentification creates a hollow core within the person. The outer shell is strong, capable, and impressive, but the inner world is a desert of unmet needs. The child skipped the stage of development where one learns how to receive care. Instead, the child only learned how to provide it. This creates a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that persists into adulthood. The individual feels like a machine that is constantly running on empty, yet the person is terrified to stop. The brain of the child has been trained to equate rest with danger. If the child stops being useful, the child fears this person will lose their place in the world. Think of the child as a small sapling that was forced to grow a thick, rough bark long before the sapling reached full height. The bark protects the tree from the harsh winds, but it also makes the tree rigid. The tree cannot sway in the breeze. The tree cannot be flexible. The tree is so focused on staying upright that the tree forgets how to grow leaves and flowers. This is the tragedy of the child who grew up too fast. The child gained the strength of an adult but lost the softness of a child. The child became a hero when the child should have been a student of life. The child became a shield when the child should have been the one protected behind the shield. Every time this person anticipates a problem before it happens, or every time this person apologizes for something that was not their fault, that is the hypervigilant child still trying to keep the world from spinning out of control. The hypervigilance once kept the child awake at night, scanning for footsteps, has now evolved. But here is where the story takes a turn that most people never see. Up until now, the world has only told the child that the childhood was stolen. People have only looked at the burden and the exhaustion. But there is a third type of person that emerges from this fire. A person who has transformed the survival mechanism into a rare and powerful intelligence. This is the empathetic architect. The very same hypervigilance that once kept the child awake at night, scanning for footsteps, has now evolved into a level of emotional intelligence that most people will never achieve. This individual possesses a social superpower. While others are guessing what people feel, the person who grew up too fast already knows. The person can read the unspoken tension in a boardroom, the hidden sadness in a friend's smile, and the subtle shift in a room's atmosphere long before anyone else. This is not just a scar from the past. This is a refined, high-level perception. The child did not just lose a childhood. The child gained a map of the human soul. Think about the way the brain has been wired. Because the child had to solve adult problems with a child's limited resources, the brain became incredibly creative and resourceful. This survivor has a unique ability to find order in the middle of a storm. When a crisis hits, most people panic. But the person who grew up too fast feels a strange, calm clarity. The heart rate of the individual remains steady because the person has been here before. The brain has been training for this since the age of 6. This person is the one who knows exactly what to do when everything is falling apart. This is the strength of a leader who leads with deep empathy. The person does not just lead with logic. The person leads with an understanding of human vulnerability. The person knows how to protect the people around the person because the person knows exactly what it feels like to be unprotected. The childhood was not a loss of power. It was the birth of a different kind of power. It was the training ground for a warrior of peace. Imagine the person standing in a crowded room. Every movement, every glance, every breath from the people around the person is like a note in a symphony that the person can hear clearly. This is the slow-motion moment of realization. The person is not burdened by this awareness anymore. The person is the master of it. The person can use this gift to heal, to connect, and to build bridges that others cannot even see. The hyper-independence that once felt like a prison now becomes a foundation of rock-solid self-reliance. The person knows that the person can survive anything because the person already has. The person has walked through the fire of responsibility and came out with a heart made of gold and nerves made of steel. The resilience of this individual is not just about staying upright. It is about the ability to transform the pain of the past into the wisdom of the future. The person is no longer a victim of a lost childhood. The person is the architect of a meaningful life. The twist is this: the child was never just a victim of circumstances. The child was an alchemist. The child took the leaden weight of parental stress, the coldness of neglect, and the darkness of instability, and the child turned it all into the gold of character. The deep sense of responsibility is no longer a chain, it is a compass. The ability to care for others is no longer a trap, it is a choice. When this person finally gives the self permission to be soft, the person discovers that the softness is backed by a strength that is unbreakable. The person is like a lighthouse. The lighthouse is built on the harshest cliffs facing the most violent waves. But that is exactly why the lighthouse is able to guide others to safety. The person who grew up too fast is a guide for the modern world. The world needs people who can see the invisible, who can stay calm in the chaos, and who can lead with a heart that has been tempered by reality. The person looks in the mirror and finally sees the truth. The child inside is no longer crying for a lost toy. The child is looking up at the adult with pride. The child is saying, "Look at what we built. We took the broken pieces and made something beautiful." The person is not a broken adult. The person is a highly evolved human being who was forged in a crucible. This is the moment where the exhaustion begins to lift, replaced by a deep, resonant sense of purpose. The person realizes that being the one who holds the umbrella is not a duty anymore. It is a gift the person chooses to share with the world, but this time the person remembers to stand under the umbrella too. The person is finally whole. So, what do we do with the house on the scaffolding? For so long, the person has believed that if the scaffolding is removed, the entire structure will collapse. The person has spent decades tightening the bolts and painting the metal poles, making sure the house looks perfect from the street. But here is the secret that the person needs to hear today. The foundation is finally dry. The years of survival, the years of responsibility, and the years of holding everything together have created a base of concrete and steel beneath the feet of the person. The scaffolding is no longer what is holding the person up. The person is holding the person up. It is time for the person to start taking the metal poles down one by one. It is time to let the house breathe. It is time to let the world see the real walls, even the ones that might have a few cracks or a little bit of moss growing on the side. The cracks are not signs of weakness. The cracks are the places where the light gets in. The first step to healing is not a grand gesture. It is a tiny, quiet rebellion against the voice of the inner critic. The person should try a micro step today. This micro step is called the 5-minute unproductive window. For 5 minutes, the person will do something that has absolutely no utility, no purpose, and no benefit to anyone else. The person will not clean. The person will not plan. The person will not help. The person will simply sit or stare at a leaf or listen to a song or eat a piece of fruit without checking the phone. In those 5 minutes, when the familiar feeling of guilt starts to rise, the person will speak to the child inside. The person will say, "We are safe now. Nothing will fall apart if we stop for 5 minutes. I am the adult now, and I am giving you permission to just be." This tiny act of defiance is how the person begins to retrain the brain. This is how the person teaches the nervous system that the war is over. The person must understand that the need to be perfect was a shield, but now that shield is heavy. The person can put the shield down. The person can be messy. The person can be confused. The person can even be the one who needs help for a change. Asking for help is not a sign that the person is failing. Asking for help is a sign that the person is finally strong enough to stop pretending. The person has spent a lifetime being the hero for everyone else. Now it is time for the person to be the hero for the child who is still waiting inside the house. The person can go to that child, take the child by the hand, and lead the child out into the sun. The person can tell the child that the work is finished. The person can tell the child that the childhood can finally begin right here in the present moment. It takes a massive amount of courage to stop being the one who has all the answers. It takes incredible strength to admit that the person is tired. But in that tiredness, there is a deep truth. The person has done enough. The person has been enough. The person has carried enough. The journey of the child who grew up too fast is a journey from the burden of duty to the freedom of being. The person is not just a collection of responsibilities. The person is a living, breathing, feeling human being with a right to joy that is not earned through labor. The person is a masterpiece of resilience, a work of art that was carved out of the hardest circumstances. And as the person moves forward, the person can carry the wisdom of the past without the weight of the past. The person can be both the wise elder and the curious child at the same time. Take a deep breath and feel the ground beneath the feet. That ground is solid. That ground is yours. The people who love the person do not love the person for what the person does. They love the person for who the person is. And it is time for the person to start loving the person for that same reason. The path ahead is not about doing more. The path ahead is about being more, being present, being soft, being free. The scaffolding is coming down, and what is left behind is a home that is warm, stable, and finally truly alive. Remember, you are not broken. You are a masterpiece in progress.